Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Greg Mannarino. You can visit his website on traderschoice.net. You can follow him on YouTube. And I am very happy to have Greg on the X22 Report Spotlight. Greg, welcome to the Spotlight.
Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for being here. Let's start off with our favorite topic, the Fed. And this year, they were supposed to raise rates, 3-4 times? And now they decided, hey, listen, we're not going to raise rates at all. Actually, they even decided that they're not going to unwind their balance sheet. I think they're going to start that in fall. They're going to, actually end it in the fall time period. Why all of a sudden this big reversal? Isn't the economy doing fantastic? You look at the numbers, you look at unemployment, you look at the stock market, but you look at all these different things. Wouldn't you think the Fed would be raising rates right now, saying, wow, these numbers look great. The economy's doing great. We should raise the rates.
Well, yeah, it would be, except that we're living in a complete and total farce. Even the numbers that you're talking about the U3 with regard to the unemployment numbers, the real number, the U6, is more than twice that. People aren't supposed to know that. People are not supposed to know that we're seeing the PMI fall off of a cliff, the ISM 9 manufacturing fall off a cliff, the ISM manufacturing fall off a cliff, the money velocity remaining at a historic low. We are in no recovery at all whatsoever. And they understand that, and this is why they can never stop. They won't ever stop. As a matter of fact, I have no doubt in my mind at all that we will be getting a rate cut coming soon. Look, let's face it, there's nobody out here, and this is the truth. I want people to look this up if they don't believe me, that has called the Fed better than me, better than Jim Grant himself, who is the known Fed watcher. I'm very proud of my work, and I'm not sitting here touting it, but the fact of the matter is, they're trapped. All world central banks are in the same boat. They've inflated an epic bubble in debt, and the only thing they can possibly do is continue to fuel it. It can't stop. Once we admit we're saturated, we've hit that maximum point of debt saturation, that's it. This whole party ends, and it ends big, and it ends fast. So, they can say what they want to. They can say, as a matter of fact, like you just alluded to, yeah, absolutely. They're going to stop unwinding their balance sheets. First of all, they've never stopped. What central banks are doing, and I am more than certain you're aware of this, they are buying each other's debt. They're keeping it off balance sheet. How does the Federal Reserve actually keep rates low, or any central bank for that matter? They have to print cash out of thin air and buy the debt. They can't just say it. They're not magical. So interest rate suppression, like you cannot believe, the middle class getting robbed blind because their interest earning accounts cannot earn a yield. And what is this doing? This is supporting the stock market. The middle class is being forced to subsidize the stock market. And if we get a rate cut, which I believe is coming, probably more than one, that's more subsidies for the stock market than if we get in more quantitative easing. That's being tossed around too. What's going to happen? Yeah, sure. The stock market is going to go higher, but how is that going to help the middle class person out here? It's a terrible thing that we are trapped in right now. And there may be a fix here, but no one wants to do it, Dave. What we would have to do to at least possibly lessen the pain that is going to come, and there's no way out of it. Look at the yield curve. Let's talk about that first. We have a yield curve which is essentially, most of it is inverted. This morning, when the market was selling off, you had alluded to stocks being down. Yeah, Dow was down 650 points, 648 at one point when we found out that these China trade talks might be falling apart, which is a whole other thing, which we could talk about if you want to. But the 10-year was yielding less than the 6-month. The yield curve is an amazing indicator, or the non-existent curve is an amazing indicator of what's coming down the pike. Now, we have no curve anymore. Most of it is inverted. And historically, what has this told us? Very simple. That a recession is coming. When? Who knows? So every effort imaginable is going to be utilized to keep rates suppressed, especially because we are in an election cycle. It all plays together. You know what I mean? So the stock market is going to be used as a tool, as a distraction. Keep looking at the stock market. Sure, it's going higher. Don't look at what's going on the ground. Okay, they're going to fist feed people all kinds of data and try to twist it and tell you that it's real. Meanwhile, all you need to look at is the money velocity, the rate at which cash is moving through an economy. You know this, I'm sure, better than anybody else. You cannot have an economic recovery or boom without cash moving. If cash isn't moving, we're going nowhere. It has to be moving higher, the velocity of money, for an economy to be working. All we have, Dave, is this whole thing is floating on top of a bubble of debt, the largest we have ever seen in the history of the world. Now, it's not just here in the United States. This is a global phenomenon. All world central banks are doing the same thing. I believe the reason why this bubble is being so hyped up is because when this one pops, is going to be the bubble to end all bubbles. I mean, we are seeing in this particular stock market bubble elements of the dot-com bubble, and, of course, the bubble that we just suffered in 2008, the credit bubble. Nothing has changed except this one eclipses them all by exponents. So what does that tell us? A lot of effort is going in to keep that market inflated. I mean, sure, would I personally like to see, from a market standpoint, I want to be clear, would I like to see a rate cut? Would I like to see quantitative easing? Well, sure. The stock market will vault higher. But from a human standpoint, it's going to decimate the middle class at one particular time. And that's really the plan in my view, Dave. The plan here is to create a two-tier society. You and I have spoken about this before. The haves and the have-nots, and extremes on both ends. The middle class, when this comes down, is going to be wiped out. Now, going back to what I was saying, because I'm laying down some groundwork here. The way to fix it, and people say, hey, Greg, you talk a good game, but what do you do to fix it? Well, you know what? To take the edge off here, and maybe it would lessen the pain to a certain degree, they got to fix the core of the problem, which is the debt-based economic model itself. But we have fought wars. The entire Vietnam War was fought to establish the petrodollar and the fiat monetary system. Most people, I think, at this point are aware of that. We have fought wars, and thousands upon tens of thousands of people have lost their lives to create the system. So in order to take away the power of world central banks, all you need to do is to have a commodity-backed currency. They will not allow it. They'll assassinate people. They will wipe out tens of thousands of us if they have to. They will not give up that power. Would we be able to fight endless wars if we had a commodity-backed currency? Of course not. It would restrain spending. That's not what they want. They want to keep spending and inflating until we hit that wall. And when we do, a new system will be introduced. It will also be debt-based, but it will not be, unfortunately, sadly, in the interest of the middle class person out here who's going to lose big time when this corrects. I hate looking at this from this perspective, but unless we get it would take a revolution on a worldwide scale to suck power from these world central banks who are running the entire show. There are hundreds of central banks around the world. I think most people are aware of that. And it would literally take a worldwide revolution to stop it, to stop this criminal organization from doing what they're doing. And they are vampires, Dave. They're sucking us dry. The middle class is being forced to subsidize this stock market bubble. It's pathetic. And people don't even understand it. They don't realize that by having an interest earning account, they're earning interest less than the actual rate of inflation. All they're fist-fed is lies and propaganda. And I tell you, it gets to me. It makes me flip out. It really does. But again, I'm sorry. I'm running off at the mouth here. I apologize.
That's fine. So right now we're in a private Western central bank economy. And like you said, there's private Western central banks in many, many countries around the world. And we also have the ECB, which is, the European Central Bank. And we have the Federal Reserve, which is the central, and we have the IMF, which is a central bank. We have the biz, which is a central bank. And they continually pump up these bubbles. They have to continually create currency. But what I see happening around the world is that each country, and there's many of them, the amount of people working and the amount of tax receipts coming in to pay the interest down on the debt, it's becoming harder and harder to do.
Oh yeah.
And the central banks right now, they are kind of exposed to the entire thing because they don't have a distraction. Because if the system came down today, like all of a sudden there was a black swan or something happened, it would be the central bank that would be sitting there exposed to everyone, because everyone would say, well, wait a minute, you were in control of the economy in the United States. You were controlling Europe and everywhere else. And all of a sudden, everything started to fall apart. So if we're in a private Western central bank and the growth of the world is slowing, the debt is growing, and the tax receipts that are coming in can't keep up with the debt, eventually, don't you think, because of this exposure, that we will have a chance to say, hey, it is the central bank that is the problem?
Well, if we get a complete meltdown of the system and people rise up enough to say, it's time to put an end to this criminal organization, sure. But I think what people don't understand is on a bigger scale, because people think they're going to go about their lives in the way they are now. But the fact of the matter is that world central banks have done something or been successful in doing one thing that is exceedingly frightening. And I want people to think about this. We have watched global debt go up like a hockey stick. We've in a hockey stick form. You understand what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure. It's just like, let's just say gone ballistic, gone almost vertical. And we've seen the global population follow in tandem. So what happens when all of a sudden we are facing that moment where the debt cannot be serviced anymore? What would happen to U.S. credit, U.S. debt? Because that's how everything works. This is a debt-based economic model. What would happen to the currency in people's pockets? How would they transact? And what would happen again to the population, not just of the United States, of the world, if all of a sudden the debt bubble pops? Well, it would not be able to be sustained. You will see millions of people die, millions around the world. And what's going to end up happening is complete pandemonium and panic. And what are people going to do? They won't have the power to rise up here. This is a setup. This has been a setup since it was started. All these institutions realized at one particular time this whole thing wasn't going to work anymore. But as of now, the more debt that world central banks issue, the stronger they get. And unfortunately, we continue to allow this mechanism to manifest itself until it's going to be too late. You are absolutely correct. There is going to be a moment where we can't do it anymore, where every single dime has been sucked out of the members of the middle class here. And then when that debt bubble pops, this is the scenario. It's very simple to understand how it's going to work. Let's look at this from a monetary standpoint. And then, you can just imagine how this is going to play out on the ground on a human level. So we understand, and I don't think anyone can argue that we are in the largest bubble the world has ever created with regard to debt. It's just unbelievable. There's nothing like it. Now, that's inflated a stock market bubble that has caused malinvestments across the spectrum. That is, again, housing bubble is reinflated. Stock market bubble has been reinflated. There are inverse bubbles, gold and silver, which are being priced off of the derivative, which we should talk about that too. And so what's going to end up happening when again, the debt bubble pops? Well, it's not going to be a slow motion train wreck. You're going to get a whole bunch of people running to the door at the same time, meaning there is the potential here for a massive, and I mean massive, sharp sell-off in the bond market when individuals or institutions realize or can put into a perspective, why would I be holding a debt unit that is yielding nothing when the stock market is doing nothing but hit record highs? Granted, again, we took a loss today, but let's look at the bigger picture. So this is just a matter of time. It's literally a time bomb. The debt market is a time bomb waiting to go off. And when it does, we are going to get a massive and rapid spike in the bond yields. This is going to put an enormous amount of pressure on the stock market. What's that going to do? You're going to get a huge sell-off in the debt market, a huge sell-off in the stock market. And that's, again, people are going to get wiped out during this mechanism. Their investments, their 401ks, their housing value is going to plummet. Again, as rates are spiking, who's going to buy a house when rates are normalizing? No one even knows what the actual normal rates would be if it weren't for central bank suppression. So again, we're facing a moment here. As soon as that happens, we're going to start to see the money velocity, which I spoke about earlier, pick up. Right now, we're at historic lows, so we know we're not in an economic recovery at all. There cannot be a recovery without, that's why we have, quote unquote, no inflation. We've been hearing this across the board. Oh, there's no inflation. It's just an incredible thing. But okay, that's because the money isn't moving. So if the cash starts to move, if we get a massive sell-off here in the debt market, a massive sell-off here in the stock market, cash will start to move. So not only do we have the debt bubble bursting, eating up the value or whatever is left of the paper currency that's all around the world. Now you got all of these extra bills in digital form and printed form chasing the same amount of goods. So this has the potential to be about 100 times worse than the Great Depression. And you can only, from human terms, think about what that means for people. All people are going to think about at that point is how they can survive, how they can literally feed themselves and their children. There's not going to be enough people to understand this system well enough, like you and I guarantee you that most of your followers understand this very well. There's not enough of us that have enough knowledge behind us. We can't. I wish some people would take a video like this, Dave, and spread it around the world. Because maybe we can wake some people up. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, when this all ends, we are going to see, unfortunately, millions of people dead all over the world. It's probably going to lead to conflicts all around the world. People will be fighting themselves in the street instead of coming together. Okay, people need to come together. The job right now is very simple. They're trying to divide us by every manner possible. I am urging people to stop falling into the trap. Start coming together and understand that we are responsible for each other, because there's going to be a time where we're going to need to rely on each other instead of pointing fingers and saying it's their fault. No, it's their fault. That's how they win throughout the centuries, throughout the millennium. They keep us divided. We can't be that way, because in a worst case scenario, like I just outlined for you, and you always have to think of things in those terms. You have to have the high ground. And the only way to have the high ground is to be prepared for the worst. Because if you just took the situation that we have now and reversed it, that would end up in a worst case scenario. And I cannot imagine how it's not going to reverse, because everything is so distorted. I don't know what else to say.
Well, let me back up a little bit, because you were talking about division and people taking sides. One thing that we all agree on is money. We all agree on that we would like to have a job. We would like to make money. We would like to support our families. Even if people are out there saying, listen, I don't really care about money. Well, how do you pay for your electric? How do you pay for your water? How do you pay for your place to, where you need to live? You need money to survive. Yes, you can survive out in the woods, but again, it's a little difficult for the everyday person. But money brings us together. Now, if there is a crisis that you're talking about that's coming up, and we have this crisis like we had, in 2008, back then they did the opposite of what we wanted to happen. They bailed out all the corporations and stimulus was created, and it didn't go the way everyone thought. So they used the crisis for something completely different. What about this time if we have this crisis and people come together because the crisis hits everyone and everyone's like, whoa, wait a minute, this is terrible. What happens if there's now pressure on governments to go and look at the central bank? Because at this point, which is worse than 2008, which is probably going to be worse than the Great Depression, at this point, we're all going to be in the same boat, because we've never seen anything like this before. And we're all going to say, why did this happen? And we know that like Rand Paul, Tom Massey, they all have like bills, waiting to audit the Fed and things like that. Maybe out of, stroke of luck or whatever, that all of a sudden they pass the bill and say, you know what, let's look into the Fed because this happened and we saw it happen in 2008 and here we are again. And the same thing is happening, but it's much, much worse. They have the crisis. They have the people yelling and screaming. And what happens if we find that there was criminal activity within the Fed? Because I'm pretty convinced that if we looked into the Fed's books, it's not going to look pretty darn good. It's going to look pretty darn bad for the Fed. Does that mean we can wipe out the debt because they were doing things not in the best interest of the people?
All right. Well, let's talk about that. First of all, if we just use 2008 as an example, there was major criminality going on across all the big banks, what they were doing, and nobody went to jail. Nobody got in trouble. Nobody. And that'll be exactly what's going to end up happening here, too. But with regard to the debt, what people don't understand is everything is linked to it. The debt market is what, in this environment, is determining value for everything. By rates being suppressed, you see where the stock market is. By rates being suppressed, you've seen that where housing has gone. An unimaginable Herculean effort is going in to keep the price of gold and silver suppressed. I also think they're keeping the price of cryptocurrency suppressed too, which is unfortunate. I think the whole concept of it is pretty good, but once Wall Street got their hands on Bitcoin futures, just like I said, get out of it when it hit 20 grand. Well, it played out exactly like I said it would. But the issue is, if we were to say, let's just hit the delete button with regard to the debt, what would happen to the dollars in their pocket going back to money? It would go up in smoke. You would be completely destitute. Zero. You'd have no purchasing power. You'd have to start bartering. The dollars that we have are units of debt. We don't even own them, Dave. You know that. These are unbacked liabilities being dispersed by a bankrupt government. Now, these bills here are owned by the Federal Reserve and owed back to the Federal Reserve or the issuing central bank, plus interest that they print out of thin air. So if someone, and I get this all the time on my channel, well, let's just hit the delete button. Sure. Do you think that the bill in your pocket is going to be able to buy the same thing, being that it's connected directly to the debt? Absolutely not. Your bill would be worthless. You could light it on fire. You might as well do that or use it for wallpaper. We've seen this before too. So to fix the debt-based economic model, which would mean we would have to stop fighting wars around the world, a lot of alliances would have to be dissolved. We would have to revalue the price of gold at least 10 times higher, at least, maybe more than that, maybe 20, 25. And then we would have to put back the currency with a fraction of that gold, but what that would do. And why gold? Because gold is the most stable asset in history. If people don't want to believe me on that, look it up for yourself, do a little homework, don't take my word for anything I'm saying. So, but what that would do is, again, restrain spending, and that is not what our governments want. That is not what the central banks want. Look at here in the United States. We have debts and deficits that continue to explode. Why? It's the debt-based economic model. It demands that debt be borrowed into existence in greater and greater amounts just to sustain where we are, not to grow, just to sustain where we are. And as you alluded to earlier, we're getting to a point where we are getting close to that maximum saturation point, and we are going to hit it. No one is smart enough to know when. I swear to you, this has gone on so much longer than me and I think most guys would have ever imagined, because there's so much underhanded stuff going on right now, Dave, between these world central banks, between governments. This whole thing is so twisted. It is so rigged against the middle class person here who is supporting this entire thing with their blood and guts, literally. By being put around the world to fight endless wars. Why are we in Venezuela? Because we care so much about the Venezuelan people? Because there's crude oil there. That's why. It's about oil. It's about money. That's all it's about. And you're right. Money has become a damn religion, and I'm sick of it. Sure, like you said, we all need it. And quite honestly, I probably have a lot more money than I need. But let me tell you something. I am a very charitable person, and I give a substantial amount of my income away. That's the truth. And I wish people would embrace that too. Love each other, care about each other, be charitable. It's so important. And that's because that's what's going to happen. Look, We are in a catch-22 or an X22 kind of a
That's funny.
situation with regard to these world central banks. They have every freaking angle figured out. And again, unfortunately, there are not more people like you and like the people that listen to your show who have enough functioning brain cells to understand the gravity of this. I had a conversation a couple of weeks back, maybe a month ago now, with a couple of very well-educated, wealthy people. So I'm sitting here talking to them, and when I started talking about this stuff, their mouths hung open. We were going over some of this, talking about the stock market, where's it going, They had no idea whatsoever. They didn't even know what a debt-based economic model was. They don't know how this works. People don't get it. You have to think that you and me and the people that listen to your show, and I would like to say my show too, are really the elite. They're the people that have a very keen understanding of how this works. But we are the gross, and I cannot overstress that word, gross minority. And we would literally need, again, a revolution on a worldwide scale. And people would have to die, as in every kind of revolution, to take our power back. An unbelievable amount of effort has gone in to stealing away our liberty, stealing away the foundation of our country here in the United States. Our forefathers never wanted a debt-based economic model, but that's what we got. We had it shoved in our throat because they wanted to establish the petrodollar. They wanted to establish a fiat monetary system, and they didn't care how many people they had to kill to do it. They fought an entire war to do it. And
it's funny because you said that, a lot of people have to die. I mean, a lot of people.
I hate to say that.
No, I know, but a lot of people died when we came off the gold standard and we went on the petrodollar system.
Oh, yeah, they did. Look how many they sacrificed.
Well, and they still did, because if you look at Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Syria.
Look at all of that.
I mean, people have died to go on to their petrodollar
and people are still asleep. They're still asleep, Dave. You're so correct. This is what I'm talking about. People don't think, they go, oh, it's all about oil. Oh, it's all about this. Yeah, sure. But what are you doing about it? Are you starting your own blog? Well, are you going out there telling people, look at the slaughter that's occurring every single day around you? Aren't we responsible for that too? About the bombs that are being dropped on people just to keep the price of crude oil higher? I mean, it's an incredible thing. People don't want to wake up, Dave. Some people, and I'm going to say it again, can stare into the sun and not see the light. And this is what you and me and your followers are up against. It's a terrible battle. And I wish someone out here, maybe it's you, is smart enough to get enough of us together that we can do something like this. Because look, I served this country. I wore the uniform. Okay. I made an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States, to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Yeah, I did that. Would I be willing to do it again? Absolutely.
So you mentioned the gold standard. I mean, we came off the gold standard in 1970. I know a little bit before that they were already pushing us off the gold standard, but that's when Nixon actually made the announcement and we came off the gold standard. Can we reverse it? I mean, we're able to come off of it. Can we reverse it now and go back onto some type of standard where if the debt is deleted, yes, your Federal Reserve debt note will go to zero. I mean, if you look at the $100 bill.
It should be a treasury note. We need to get off of that's what it really should be. And you're absolutely right. And this is what I said. We need a worldwide revolution for us to take away the world central bank's power. We would need a coordinated effort, not just with the people, but we would need people in high levels of government to agree that we were going to do something like this again, because we have fought wars and continue to support the petrodollar system, to keep the price of crude oil elevated, to make sure the energy sector continues to get a boost, and make sure the financial sector, who finances the entire thing, keeps the wheels greased too, with the blood and guts of the people. Yeah, it is a possibility, but it is so remote at this particular time because there's not enough of us, Dave. There's not enough. I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm some kind of a rebel, but I would gladly join some type of a rebellion to turn this around, but they'll squash us like bugs. I mean, the Federal Reserve has their own police force. Do you know who the enforcement arm is of the Federal Reserve? It's the United States military. And how do we know that? because they defend the petrodollar. How does the petrodollar even exist? The petrodollar exists only because OPEC nations have agreed to price their oil in US dollars for US military protection of that oil. The military, people don't even know this. I was a freaking lieutenant in the Navy, and people didn't know that, okay? Officers don't know that. So you think the enlisted guy is going to know that? Of course not. But we are mandated to protect the oil of OPEC nations. We would have to stop that too. And that would create war on a global scale. Maybe a world war is what we need to go back to a gold standard. Unfortunately, it would be that extreme because central banks are a curse upon this earth. And I think everyone knows that who's listening to this, but there's not enough of us. We would have to get this video, Dave, that we're doing right now, and it would have to get about 1 billion views, and maybe we can get some people to understand how twisted and disgusting and corrupt this entire thing is, because it is not kings, queens, presidents, or monarchs who are running this world. It is the central banks. It's those who are controlling the cash. The rest of it is a sitcom, period.
Before I get to my question, I just want to say, hey, Greg, thank you very much for your service and thanks for defending the United States, first of all. My question to you is that I do see that there are movements that are growing out in the world. There might not be gigantic, but I mean, first we had the Brexit. I know it's a tough battle, with the people in the UK to get the Brexit, but we had that vote and the people said, something, we don't want to be part of the EU. We have Italy that's saying, central bank, I want my gold back. And, please give it to us. And if you don't give it to us, we're going to actually take it. And you're starting to see like Hungary and Italy and other countries saying, something, we don't agree with the EU and what they're doing. And we don't want to go along with your policy. So you see a little like a crack in what has been happening, and everyone is not really agreeing, and everyone is not starting to take sides. I mean, look at the yellow vest. People started to come out saying, listen, we don't want to be taxed. It's enough already. Isn't this how it begins though? It's small. I'm not saying like, there's 1 billion of people out there and we're going after the central bank, but it's small and it's starting.
No, you're right. And I'm really happy you brought that up, because this is what we need to see. And we need to see more people backing movements like this around the world. Unfortunately, these things get squashed. You remember Occupy Wall Street? Yep. I wrote a paper on that. I said this movement is going to be squashed in a matter of a few months, and I was exactly right. All of these things, unfortunately, they sound good. And then when people realize that they're suffering, then people back off. But you're right. There is going to be a moment, I am certain of it, when people start to see how it's affecting their own lives. And maybe at that point, I hope it would happen sooner than later. But I think, unfortunately, things are going to get a lot worse. And again, for me, people look at their own lives and they say, okay, you know what? I'm sitting here. I'm doing okay. I got a job. Sure, I'm getting by. I'm doing all right. I got a couple of kids. I got a great wife, a dog, a cat, maybe a gerbil or two. So they become disconnected from this whole thing, and they think people like you and me and the people listening to this are out of our minds. I get it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Everything is fine. There's never going to be another market crash. Everything is perfect. This is the mentality of most people. But again, you're right. There are these little movements out there. And if there were a way to unify this whole thing, to maybe bring more people together and make them, and people would have to be willing to sacrifice a lot. As a matter of fact, they need to be willing to die for a cause they believe in. And there's not enough. There's just not enough yet. I'm not saying there won't ever be, but right now we are so far from that. And I still think they got us trapped here. They got us in that X22, that catch-22 with regard to the debt bubble. Because when this pops, it's going to be very rapid. People don't understand how markets work for the most part. I know you do. People run to the doors very quickly. No one wants to be the last guy out the door. So when this whole thing ends up correcting to a fair value, because that's all the market's job is. It has one job. People look at these markets and they have no idea what even a security is. What is security? People don't understand that the whole job of these markets is to do one thing, to determine fair value. And that value is determined by having buyers and sellers existing in an environment that is not rigged, that is not, again, forcing cash into specific assets for a specific reason. Now, since this market tried to correct in 2008, that's all it was doing, was trying to find fair value, was trying to correct the distortions that exist. We are so far above that by exponents right now that you can only imagine how the carnage that's going to be unleashed this time on people. It's going to make the 2008 event is going to look like a walk in the park when this one corrects to fair value. And I don't think people are ready for it. They're too caught up in their own comfortable lives. And it's going to be too late. You know how many people hold gold and silver? I know you do. I do. I know probably, and at least I hope that most of the people listening to this do as well. We are a fraction of the population. I tell people all the time that I believe these are the most undivided assets in the history of the world. And let me put a perspective on that. No running off at the mouth, but listen to this, people. I am an equity derivatives trader. This is what I do for a living. It's all I do. Okay, I understand these markets. I think I have a very good perspective on them. Now, let's say, for example, right now I own derivatives on Amazon. I have calls. A call option is a derivative. Okay, it has nothing to do with what the stock does for the most part. It's a side bet. Okay, so the derivative Amazon, the options I hold, derive value from what Amazon stock does. Now let's talk about gold and silver. Gold and silver works completely the opposite. The hard asset, gold and silver, derive value from the derivative. I want people to think about that. This is how they're getting away with rigging the market. They can dump as much paper as they want to onto the market. They can conjure it up out of thin air, and it will suppress the price of gold and silver. This is how twisted this entire thing is. People don't understand even those kinds of basic concepts, but it's the truth. People do not understand the markets, because if they did, they'd be very afraid. But again, people living in their comfortable lives with their pretty wife and their gerbils running around. And Dave, if we can get more people together, it would take legions of us. Legions. Here in the United States, where people, unfortunately, are the most dumbed down on earth. People here in this country, and I interact with people all over the world, are the most dumbed down, bar none, by far. People in other parts of the world understand this a lot better. And maybe if we got some Americans to understand it, we can make a difference. But no. They're too busy keeping us divided so they can conquer us, period.
But don't you think all those, I mean, you mentioned the people that, they feel comfortable in their, their living and their homes, but you're comfortable until you're not comfortable. You're comfortable until something bad happens. Think about all those people that in 2008 that had jobs. And then when you lost your job, you started to realize what's wrong here. And a lot of people woke up then. This time around, if all these people, they lose their job, they lose their wealth, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, now it's me. Now I'm not comfortable anymore. And maybe this would give us the movement that we need.
Maybe it would. But what happened last time when people got literally bodily carried out of their homes as the banks were taking them over, they're kicking them out in the street? Gone. The sheriffs come there. Did anyone band together and help these poor people? Legions of them, thousands upon tens of thousands of people. This have hundreds of thousands of people all over this country were kicked out of their homes in the same way, led up by law enforcement, enforcing the law. Okay, because that's what their jobs are going to depend on it too. So what will end up happening is the law, they're going to want to keep their jobs while the rest of the people are suffering around us, and they're going to stick together, and they're going to make sure that people feel nothing but a hard boot right in their ass when they're being kicked out into the street, just like last time. And then you know what's going to happen? Just like last time, the Federal Reserve, what did they do? They bought up all the banks. They bought up the toxic assets. We paid for it. And what did they do? They reinflated a housing bubble. Those toxic assets are now worth something. It's a crime. Those people should be compensated. You know who got compensated? Zero. Not one person. They got kicked in the ass with a boot on their throat. And that's exactly what they're going to get here now. Martial law is what's going to be the law of the land here in the United States and around the world. The military is there. Believe me, some members of the military are not going to do it. but some will. And this is another reason why they want to take away your guns, why they want to take away your firearms. It's all a method of control, because that's what they're going to do. Believe me, just like you said, do you think that the people that are in law enforcement, while society is crumbling around them, are going to give up a paycheck? Hell no. What are they going to do? They're going to make sure they enforce the law, just like they did last time. And if they have to call in the military to do that too, they'll do that too. People end up at FEMA camps. This is the truth. You got to think of this from that kind of a perspective, because it's not going to be a slow burn, Dave. This is going to be rapid when it happens. People are going to be so blindsided. They are going to be so taken by surprise when this thing does correct to fair value, because all they're being told is how great everything is. Our economy is fabulous. Things are just perfect. And it's literally the polar opposite. There's nothing that is real. We are floating on an environment of debt. So it's just like a guy. Let's say me. Let's say I took out a line of credit. Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm borrowing all this cash. All of a sudden, the bill becomes due. I look like I'm doing great, don't I? I have a beautiful house. I bought myself a nice Maserati or a BMW. I bought my wife all kinds of new clothes. I'm looking sharp, and all of a sudden, the bill comes due. Guess what? Just because the illusion then becomes real. And that's what's going to happen here in the United States. Let me say this. The United States and around the world, it has become Enron. If anyone wants to look at a scenario where things were an illusion until they became real, watch The Smartest Guys in the Room. That's the name of the movie, the rise and fall of Enron. And you will see that's exactly what we have, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And the illusion is going to become real very quickly. At one time, Enron had $64 billion worth of assets. It took 24 days for them to go broke. I want people to think about that.
Well, can't the same thing happen to the Fed then?
Wait,
I mean, if it can happen to Enron, what happens if, like you said, this time it's going to be a lot worse? Last time it was bad, but it didn't affect the majority of the people. This time,
Of course it's going to affect the Fed. And there's already a new system here. This system has run its course as far as I'm concerned. That's why they are so desperate to keep this bubble inflated. If anyone doesn't believe that there's already a solution, this is what's going to happen, what they always do. Once a crisis hits, okay, and it gets pretty extreme, people run around like they're chickens without heads. Help me, help me, help me, government, help me, somebody help me. And then a solution is offered and they jump at it. It's like they get handed the crumbs like they get handed every single day. I can promise you, Dave, that the richest people, the 1%ers, are going to come out of this smelling like a rose. And do you know why? Because number one, they're out of the market before anybody else. Number two is they're acquiring hard assets like gold and like silver. Most of my wealthy friends, except for the group I was telling you about before, have a stash of gold and have a stash of silver. Nobody is going to be held accountable for this, just like last time. And they're going to use it as a way to control the population. That's all this is. And we're going to have an extreme example of the haves and the have-nots. The middle class is going to be written into the history books. The middle class, what people maybe don't know, is a relatively new concept. There was always a feudal system up until relatively recently. The whole dream of our forefathers and what they wanted to do here has gone out the window. Hardcore. We already have a totally managed economy. We already have a totally managed market. What do they need to do next? We need to get a dictator in there, and then we're done. And I mean, that's the first step. Look at people, read your history books. Once they manage the economy like China, once they manage the markets like China, the rest is just a joke. They've already got all the pawns in place here. There is no way, Dave, mark my words, no way that the middle class is going to win. There's too few of us. We are going to lose, and we are going to lose bigger than we can possibly imagine.
But I mean, you said there's too few of us, but isn't the middle class like the biggest portion of the United States?
They're disappearing very fast. Most people, middle class people, Dave, middle class people don't live like this. What is Greg talking about? All right, let's put a perspective on that. Right now, personal debt and consumer debt is at an all-time record high. Does that sound like middle class to you? They are buried beyond their eyeballs. We have loan defaults. This is not the middle class. It's an illusion, Dave. It's an illusion. If most people right now were not buried in debt beyond their eyeballs, they would immediately fall to the lower class. There already is. pretty much a two-tier society. The middle class is struggling here just to get by, borrowing in greater and greater amounts, just like our government, to support itself. So no, the middle class is not the largest. The middle class would immediately fall to the lower rung if they were not doing what they're doing now. This is not how the middle class would survive. Middle class people had a little nest egg put away, not just wrapped up in a 401k that's going to get wiped out when this debt bubble pops and the 401ks get all destroyed. I'm talking about they had money left over. They didn't have to struggle worrying about if there was a crisis. What am I going to do? Where am I going to come up with $2,000? Did you know that most people right now in the United States can't even come up with $2,000 in cash if there was some kind of an emergency? I don't know, for example, whatever it might be. That doesn't sound like the middle class to me. So no, the middle class is not the largest part of our society anymore.
So under a central bank economy, that's what we're in right now. The real push right now is to get rid of the central bank economy. That's what we really have to focus on.
Oh, yes, Dave, 100%. Can we do it though? Can we do it? Can we get enough people together that would be willing to literally lay down their lives to stop it? The answer to that is no. And there's where it ends. Right there. There's not enough people. People have no spines in this country. They have no backbones. They don't even know a goddamn bathroom to use anymore. Okay, because of Obama. All right. This is the society we are in. This is where we are. People always looking to somebody else to take care of it. Oh, let them worry about it. Oh, let's go send out some poor soul to go fight some war overseas. Why don't you sign up? This is what I tell people. I had some guy write to me recently about this whole thing in Venezuela. And he's like, well, you know what? We should just send some soldiers over there and assassinate whoever we want. I said, really? When are you signing up? You want somebody else to fight your battles? When are you going to be willing to do it? People have no backbone, Dave. Maybe the people that listen to your show do, and I'm certain that you have a backbone too. But most people are sheep, and they're going to be slaughtered, just like they always are every time before. It's very sad. It is very sad. Look, I am dreaming of the day, and unfortunately, maybe it will happen in a lifetime, but I doubt it. It was not going to happen anytime soon, where we do not have a central bank government-run system. They really are the government. This is the United States of corporate America. This is not the United States of America that you and I grew up in. Certainly not the one I grew up in. I'm a lot older than you. I'm sure of that. But this isn't the country I grew up in. I can promise you that. All that matters right now is the money. The small guy gets crushed by corporate greed. And what are they doing with all this cash that was repatriated with no questions asked? What are they doing? Are they building up their businesses? No, they're not. And how do we know that? Business spending is falling off of a cliff. So what they do with the repatriated cash, Dave? They bought back shares of their own stock, just like everyone knew they were going to. This is a game. It is a charade. People got to open their eyeballs and maybe be willing to, like you were saying, form militias. I don't know, do something. And better than that, learn to love each other. Learn to care about each other, because when this comes down, that's all we're going to have. If we end up with a delete button with regard to the debt, the cash will be worth nothing. You're going to be relying on your neighbor for help. There's going to be a barter system if we were to do something like that. The system relies on debt. That's what we have, Dave. You know that. It's a terrible thing. I tell you, bro. I hate to see the future. I feel very bad for kids that are being born today into this thing, this illusion that we have, because it's just not real.
You know, I look back in history and it seems like there's no hope, but I think eventually what happens is the people finally get it. And if you go back to kings, queens, and all the serfs, and you feel like, you know, it's all never going to happen, all of a sudden the people rise up with pitchforks and knives, because when you push people back into a corner and you keep giving them nothing and nothing and nothing, eventually the people will say, you know, enough is enough. And that's why we see little movements in all different areas. And I think eventually it will happen. I think it will begin. I think people will start to come together and say, you know something, we shouldn't be fighting amongst each other. There's the true enemy. It's over there. It's called the Federal Reserve. It's called the, ECB. It's called the IMF. It's called, the Rothschild banking system. I think eventually people will start to wake up. I mean, it might be
they
small.
will. And they got to be willing. Then at that point, they got to be willing to die, because what they're going to be facing on the other side is automatic weapons, tanks, planes, all that stuff, because they will be utilized, and not everyone is going to do it. I mean, I already talked to a friend of mine
Well, I don't think you need every single person. I mean, the revolution wasn't fought with every single person. It was fought with what, 10% of the people?
That's true too, but we're also talking about you were talking about people using muskets against muskets. You're almost talking about something on a level playing field. There's no comparison now to what the regular guy or the regular girl has in any way to protect themselves when they have to face police that have been militarized. There's just no way you could get one of these armed troops from the police that have been militarized, and they're going to take out 200 civilians with ease. I mean, there's just forget it. These people are trained just like they are in the military. You see the way they are dressed now. They're not cops anymore. This is an army. We've been invaded. And do you think this is by chance? Does anyone think this is by chance? It's about control. It's always about control. It's how the elite have squashed and used the middle class since the beginning of time. And if anyone thinks this time is going to be any different, they're in for a rude awakening.
Well, it might be. It might be different because I see things are changing. I didn't see people out there protesting or yellow vests or people voting for the referendum for getting
where's that thing going? You think they're going to allow that?
Well, no, I don't think the central banks they'll always fight against what they don't want. That is true. Kings have done this, queens have done this, the elite have always done this. But remember, the majority of the world, it's the people. And the majority of the world, we outnumber them. And all we have to do is get enough of us together, enough of us to band together and say no more. And I think eventually that will happen. Maybe not right now. And I know you talk about weapons and stuff, but remember, a lot of these police officers, yes, there's going to have a few that are going to love to kill people, but you're going to have other ones that are family members, the other ones that are saying, you know what, this is my neighborhood. I know these people. I don't want to do this.
That might be true too. But honestly, how many people can go out and say, I know my neighbors well enough that I can go out there and ask them for a favor let's go grab a beer. Not too many. People have been so divided. They're so in their own little capsules. They've been encapsulated, and they've been encapsulated by the internet. They've been encapsulated by their phones. They've lost the ability to interact with each other. Most people don't even have more than 3 friends that they can actually say are close. Again, this is the way societies in the past have fallen too, and we're going down the same rat hole. And this is why every single Friday, I leave off with love each other, care about each other, and be charitable. People need to come together, and they need to do it now before it's too late. It's too late. And I hate to think about how the law, whatever it might be, whether it's martial law or civil law that we have now, is going to be enforced by those who want to keep their jobs and need to feed their newborn babies and their children, while they're pulling people out of the house. We saw this. I'm not making this up. This is what happened in 2008. People were refusing to leave their homes. The sheriffs went in there armed, pulled these people out, kids, 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds, thrown into the street, nowhere to go. We will get a repeat performance because the neighbors who are watching that happen don't have the guts to stand up. Period. And if they did, they would be shot, and they don't want to die.
Well, like you said, I think we all need to love each other. We all need to come together, and we all need to stop looking at each other as the enemy and look at who the real enemy is.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the key, man. That is the key right there. Understanding who your enemy is, because right now people have no idea. Yeah. They don't know. They think that we're each other's enemies. And we are not each other's enemies. And we have to understand that this whole thing is fake. It is rigged. And it's meant to keep you divided. We got to get on the same page. People have to come together, because if they don't, we're just done.
Yeah. Greg, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
TradersChoice.net. Everything is there. All my work is free now. Everything. All my books, all my publications. Please, people, download them. Learn how to make this work for you. That's the truth. Anyway.
All right. Greg, thank you very much. Thanks for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here.